They are being called the cocaine of the tech industry. More valuable than gold or real estate, experts say, when referring to the 17 rare earth elements. At first glance, they're just unremarkable bits of metal, but they're so highly sought after that a silent war is already raging about them. China holds a near monopoly on the mining and refining of these metals. Extracting rare earths is extremely dirty. Yet they're found in nearly all high-tech products, from smartphones to electric cars. This gives China enormous market power, which it has used strategically most recently in its trade conflict with the US. Why have so many industrialized nations made themselves so vulnerable? And what can they do in response, especially now as China's foreign minister tours Europe? Our question today: the battle for rare earths. How much power does China hold over the West? Hello and welcome to The Point. Let me introduce my panel today. Felix Lee from the German broadsheet Süddeutsche Zeitung, a former China correspondent and economic journalist. Tim Borgschulte, CFO of Noble BC Company, a company trading in rare earths, and Mareike Ohlberg, China expert at the German Marshall Fund. A warm welcome to all of you. Let me start with a quote. "We are currently in a silent raw materials war. The public is largely unaware of this." Your company's founder said that. What does he mean? What's the silent war?
I think he meant that we are really in need of the Chinese product, and especially for the rare earth elements. Like you said in the intro, the German industry depends on the rare earth elements, and China can decide how much they are putting on the market and what the prices are. So it's really dangerous for the German industry, yes.
Tim, explain to us, why are rare earths so important for European industry, German industry in the US?
Why is it so important? It's because basically all high-tech product we are using nowadays, we need rare earth, and 90% of this rare earth elements are coming from China. It's not about only the mining, but even mining which is happening in other places, they ship it back to China because China has a monopoly in refining these rare elements. And this is why it's so important. And of course, it has become a security issue too, because our weapons also depend on rare earth imports from China.
And I understand that we've lost, or in many parts of the world, the skills are lost and the machinery are lost currently to refine these rare earths. We'll come to that in a moment. 70% of all rare earth metals are currently mined and processed in China. EU gets 80 to 100% of its rare earths from China. Why did Western nations fall into this trap?
I think our biggest problem has been that we have been assuming, or we didn't want to think about the fact that China could not be a trustworthy actor, that China... One thing I hear a lot is, oh, China just wants to do trade, China doesn't have any geopolitical strategy. That used to be a very common talking point across European capitals for a really long time. And that was simply a miscalculation to not understand that, yes, China also pursues certain strategies. China, of course, wants to have leverage over us to be able to influence our policy choices in other areas. So that's one reason, this intentional misreading of what China's overall positioning is. In all fairness, I will say that China has also been able, of course, to process rare earth materials, to mine them and to process them at prices that under pure market principles our own companies could not usually compete with, right? So they have simply been able to also undercut prices. If somebody else wants to get into the market, it's fairly easy for China to price them out by just, influencing what the current price is, manipulating the prices. So that's also made it more difficult for us to come up with alternatives that are, that aren't going to be priced out of the market if we go by pure market principles.
Now let's have a closer look at the stuff that we're actually talking about. And this is not a salt dispenser and a pepper dispenser. This is, of course, these are rare earths. Tell us, what have you brought with you there?
This is neodymium, terbium, and dysprosium. That are heavy rare earth, and all three are used in magnets, permanent magnets that need to be in all kinds of stuff in the high tech. We are talking about
electric cars,
green energy, but also for military products. They are necessary to produce, and they are very important for those products.
Now, these are very small quantities, of course.
Yeah.
Talk us briefly through how much does it cost?
A kilogram of the neodymium costs around about
Yes,
$80 to $90. The terbium is about $1,000 to $1,000 in China, but you can't get it out of China at the moment. So you have to pay different prices if the rare earth is already in Europe. Then you have to pay the 3 times as much. Same for the dysprosium. Dysprosium is about $200 to $300 in China and $1,200 in Europe.
Now, this stuff even looks like cocaine, I believe. Your company's boss has called this the cocaine of industry. Is China putting us on cold turkey right now?
Not totally yet, but at the moment, China is using it as a weapon in the trade war against the US. And it's working. And so China sees in this an opportunity also to negotiate and to put Europe under pressure. So it already happened in April. Officially, they didn't say they want to punish the Europeans. They use it in the trade war with the US. But as we know, also especially from the car industry, they already shortened the export of specific rare earths. And this is already putting a lot of European companies, especially German companies, under a lot of pressure. And we are talking about less export now, which is already giving hard headaches to especially the car companies.
What about stocks? How long will stocks last?
Not that long, maybe a couple of months, but China said you can't build stocks, so it's not that easy for the German companies to build stocks, and especially if we are talking about dual-use products or dual-use rare earth that can be used for civil use, like for cars, green energy and stuff like that, and also for the military stuff. It's very complicated to get them out of China, and if you want to use the terbium and dysprosium for military stuff, you can't even get it out of China. You have to fill out a document where you have to say what's the end use and what's the end product and who's using it and are you using it for military products.
So China is already bossing its clients around. Let's have a closer look at the stuff and what it's done with it. What exactly are rare earths and why is everyone so keen to get them?
This is China's sharpest response to U.S. tariffs. In April 2025, Beijing introduced export licenses for 7 rare earth elements and the magnets made from them. The supply restrictions not only affect the U.S., but companies across the globe. German industries fear production might stop. Even as tensions between Washington and Beijing begin to ease, the pressure remains. Because China dominates this market, with the US and Myanmar trailing far behind. Rare earths are 17 metals found widely in the Earth's crust, but seldom in concentrations high enough to make extraction worthwhile. And mining them harms the environment due to acid use. Still, China has invested for decades. It doesn't just hold the largest reserves, it also leads in processing. And that pays off. No smartphone works without rare earths. They are also used in electric motors and wind turbines. Even wars are difficult to wage without these coveted metals. About 400 kilograms go into one F-35 fighter jet. China's dominance in rare earths, does it pose a threat to both industry and national security?
Let me turn this question around. Wars used to be fought over oil. Will the next war be fought over that?
The next war, I don't know if it will be fought over rare earths, but rare earths are certainly going to play a role in that. Whether that is, one example of that is control, and the near monopoly that China currently has could be used to impact how countries react in a certain scenario, right? So, for instance, if China does decide to invade Taiwan, which is not necessarily a given, it could use the control that it has to actually exert power over European countries to say, you can't react to this. Like, if you impose any sanctions in response, we're going to cut you off from this stuff. So it's really, it's an instrument that China can currently use to limit the choices that we have, and that can include the choices that we have in a war scenario.
Are we maybe... is there enough public awareness that this may be going on in the background, that China is pointing the rare earth gun at, say, the US, that backed down surprisingly quickly in the most recent tariff dispute? Is China using this already?
I think the companies who are involved with this business and are dependent on this, it is an issue already for a couple of years now. Looking at the public, I'm not so sure. The most important is politicians. I think at least it's not enough awareness in politics side of how important this issue is and how we find ways to get less dependent on China. I think there has to be much more done.
Do we know what the US conceded to China to resume rare earth exports?
I mean, China has been using this as kind of the super weapon to get Donald Trump, one, back to the table, and then to make concessions on tariffs, right? Because Donald Trump, I mean, he ramped up tariffs to absolutely to levels that essentially mean that Chinese products can't go to the United States anymore. So it's really been using it to get them back to the table and to bring down tariffs and to just make concessions that otherwise the United States wouldn't have to make.
Let's talk about security and defense. We've raised the issue earlier. How important is this, especially in light of a potential future conflict with Russia or China? Is this a weapon already?
I mean, again, it's basically one. It does, if any restrictions on exports or export controls on rare earth elements do hold back our defense industry and make it impossible to produce enough to modernize our defense industry. And the more important use, at least from as far as Europe is concerned, that I see is as a way of coercing Europe into not responding any steps that China might take, whether that is a blockade of Taiwan or any other actions that China might take that would otherwise prompt European action. It can also be used to prevent other policies that would be beneficial for Europe, to, for instance, protect certain European industries, where this can be wielded as a weapon to limit our choices and to act in China's interests and along with China's interests. So it's really just a constraint on our sovereignty and the range of choices that we have in coming up with a strategy of dealing with China itself.
It's interesting, but yeah, please.
I just wanted to say, I think it's very important that Germany and the EU is now getting into a new strategy to get the rare earths, because I think it's very important for our safety, because all the new high-tech weapons depends on the rare earths, and if we are talking about drones or stuff like that, they all need the rare earths. So yeah, I think it's very important for our safety.
I have another quote here from an international policy and trade analyst. He said, "It is time for the United States to treat critical minerals not as commodities, but as instruments of geopolitical power." You agree?
Yes, totally. I mean, because China is using it as a geopolitical instrument. So, and I think I'm not sure if the Trump administration, at least at the beginning of the trade war, was aware how dependent even the US is from rare earth imports from China. That's my explanation why he switched so fast in dealing with China. And yes, at least the Biden administration was very aware of this, and they tried to take steps, but it's very, very hard to get less dependent. I mean, we already knew this, that China is using this as a geopolitical weapon. We know it since 15 years. In 2010, Japan and China had a political fight, and China already cut off Japan for a few weeks, and this brought Japanese companies in huge problems, and Japan has reacted by then. And the US was were aware, but not much has happened. The problem is it's not only that if we get the dependency from 90% so far, maybe to 80% or even 70%, this will not be enough because China can control the prices. And as long as, Mareike has mentioned this, as long as China is controlling the prices, it's very, very hard to deal with it.
I would like to talk about the alternatives that exist to China's near monopoly on rare earth. The US is pushing for more domestic mining and has made its interest in other foreign suppliers like Ukraine quite clear. But there are more options.
Trump has his sights on Greenland, which belongs to Denmark, and he's not ruling out economic or military pressure. One key reason, its vast natural resources and rare earth elements. He's also seeking to secure future raw materials in Ukraine in exchange for U.S. support against Russia's war. Despite a diplomatic clash with President Zelensky at the White House, a deal was ultimately reached. Australia, meanwhile, is positioning itself as an alternative to China, with Prime Minister Albanese announcing billions for rare earth mining. And Europe? It's pinning its hopes on Sweden. In 2023, the continent's largest known deposits were discovered there, over 1 million tons. But large-scale extraction is likely still years away. Another area with room for improvement is a sustainable method, recycling. The recycling rate is just 1%, partly due to technical complexity. Then there's research and development. BMW has developed electric motors that do not rely on rare earths. So how can China's market dominance be broken?
Yes, and I would like to put that question to you because it's not only about mining the stuff and finding it, it's also about treating it and refining it. And in Europe, for example, we've lost that capability. How is that?
I think it's because it's a very dirty business. It's very chemical, and back then we said no, we don't want to have anything to do with this kind of stuff. But as we see now, 98% of the refinery is done in China, and I think it's very important now to get this technology back in Europe and to get some production here.
You can get all this in other places than China out of the earth. Ukraine is an example, as we saw in that brief report. And the US has secured a raw materials deal with Ukraine. Why did the US get access and the EU not, even though it's more engaged in Ukraine than the US?
I mean, I think in this case, the U.S. or Ukraine was hoping for continued U.S. support, which right now is still diminishing despite this deal. So I think in this case, Ukraine was just more dependent on the U.S. to defend itself from Russia's war of aggression, right? So of course the U.S. was in a stronger position there. However, I think the strategy itself, you have to look for new access to new mines. That's important, but you also do have to think about where are you going to do your refining processes, how much of this can be done in Europe. Can it be done at a price that's realistic? Because I think it's already been teased that this is an incredibly dirty business. To do it by the standards that we would need would be quite costly. How can we set that up? What can we do here? What can we do with partners? Japan, which has diversified some of its dependency from 90% on China to 60%, is, for instance, working with Malaysia on the refining and processing of rare earths and set up a deal there. So what partnerships can we set up? What can we do here? And how do we get the knowledge back?
There is one interesting number as well. 28% of the rare earths imported into Russia in 2024, last year, came from Russia. How is that possible with all the sanctions?
Sorry, 24% from Russia?
A 28% share, despite the war, of it's become... Russia has been the second largest supplier of rare earth in 2024 to Europe with 28%. Is that something that... How is that possible?
I think it's because we depend too much on China, and we need some other places where we can get the rare earth, even if it's Russia, and Russia is selling it to some countries nearby, and this country is now selling it to Europe. So there's like kind of workaround for Russia to get this stuff into Europe.
Is there any sense to bring extraction and production back to Europe, you think?
Well, so far, no. I mean, there were efforts that were done, but the problem is the EU has introduced some programs to get the industry back to Europe, or to invest in mines in other parts of the world, but they try to use market mechanism. But on the rare earth subject, market mechanism is not working, as you have mentioned, because China is playing not with market mechanism. And so it's very hard for a German or a European company to invest when China is doing price politics. The problem is they can reduce the export of rare earth, and then the prices will get high. But they also, but they also can produce a lot of rare earth or export a lot of them, and the prices fall. And then, in that moment, it's not worth for the other companies to invest. So this means there's no other choice that the government has to get involved to build up alternatives to China.
Very briefly, is recycling an option?
Yes, but I think it's still far away. Because if we are looking, like, for example, at an electric car, in one electric car there's 1.9 to 1.5 kilograms of rare earth. So it's a lot of work to get this out of the car again, and just for
it's
a
in
small
all different
portion.
components as well. It's in the end, the motors. It's in the computers.
So it's very complicated to get like big stuff out of a lot of cars. So it is a possible way, but I think it takes a lot of time.
So I think we need to come to the final round. We've learned that it's a bit of a lifeblood, this stuff of industry in very important sectors. So how can we break free from the dependency on China, or will we remain addicts?
We need better industrial policy and more convinced and like forceful industrial policy that provides incentives to businesses to actually invest in, whether that is in mines or in some of the processing facilities that can withstand Chinese attempts to manipulate whatever market it is that they're trying to break into. So if we're gonna rely on the market to solve this, that's not gonna cut it. We need industrial policies that take on some of the risks. We're gonna have
throwing taxpayers' money at the problem.
The state is gonna have to take some of the risks. Otherwise, we're not gonna see certain investments. We need to work on various ends. So that is recycling, that is innovation, that is coming up with alternative facilities and with alternative processing mechanisms. Those all need to happen at the same time, and they need to be done in a way that really provides incentives for private players to get into this and to be willing to take the risk, because part of the risk is going to be borne, yes, collectively by all of us.
Very briefly, would you agree? You're
Yes.
part of that industry.
Totally agree. I think the government has to put some money in it to take some risk out of the mining projects for the companies. So yes, I totally agree.
Yeah, and we need to invest also in exploration science, in alternatives. There are alternatives. The problem is not only that we were dependent on rare earth, that we also dependent too much on technology from China, and where they're using rare earth. And to get less from that, we need to do much of it by ourselves.
And we need to get the skills back. Thank you very much. This is all we have time for right now. That's it for To The Point. Hope you enjoyed the show. Let us know if you're watching us on YouTube in the comments down here what you think. And from me, my panel, and the whole To The Point team, thanks for watching.